Okay, thank you everybody for joining the Africa webinar in regards to the sector consultant. It's really lovely to have you here with us today. My name is Sarah Liu. I am a recruitment executive on the MBA. One of my regions which I deal with is Africa. So really here to support you guys in your journey of wanting to pursue an MBA. Today we have some alums who will be speaking to us, and I will let them introduce themselves. Maybe Grace, we can start with you.
Thanks, Sarah. Hello, everyone. My name is Grace Njunge, and I'm an associate partner at Dahlberg Advisor, a strategy and policy advisory firm that has presence globally, but I'm part of the Kenya office. I graduated from the MBA in September 2023, and I was part of St. John's College.
Anyone can go after that.
Sure, I'll go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Ganyezi, but I typically go by Kwezi. I was part of the infamous 2019-20 COVID year of the Oxford MBA. And I am currently a consultant at BCG, recently joined, but have over 10 years experience before that in like finance and private equity. So lovely to be with you today.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Olugbemi. You can call me Gbemi. I graduated from the MBA 2020-21. I'm currently working with the Global Strategy and Innovation team for Deloitte, based out of London. Prior to that, I've had experience in tech and law. So happy to be here today.
That's great. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your journey. So maybe the first question to Grace, maybe you can tell us a little bit about why you started to pursue the MBA and your research behind that.
Thanks, Sarah. I think there was a big focus for the Oxford MBA, particularly the last decade, on the intersection of business and impact. And I was actually working at Dover prior to my MBA, but I decided I just kind of wanted to take a bit of a break, sabbatical from work, to pursue a graduate degree. And so for me, working in the social impact sector, an Oxford MBA was quite enticing, and kind of the additional extracurricular programs. So for instance, I was involved in Impact Lab. I was involved with the Africa Alliance. I do think that those activities really sort of enrichen the MBA experience. And most importantly, I think I was excited at the idea of going back to school and being immersed in a broader university context. And I think for me, my time as a member of St. John's College was just as important as my time as a member of the Oxford MBA program. And so going to an MBA that allows you to also be part of a broader university was a really big part of my decision making.
That's great. And I guess it's quite an overall question. Does anyone else want to pitch in regards to, you know, their research behind Oxford and why they decided to come to Oxford?
Sure, I can go next. So for me, it was really important to go, when I did my research on MBA programs, obviously you want to go to like the top X many in the world. And also secondly, for me, what was particularly important was having come from the continent of Africa and feeling particularly passionate about its growth and development. I really wanted a program where Africa was a meaningful representation of the cohort. And at the time in 2019-20, Oxford was really leading this charge, and we were a meaningful contributor in terms of size and representation from North, East, South, and West Africa. And as people who are from here, we know that there are regional dynamics, so we are not this just monolith that the rest of the world sees us as. And I really appreciated that. And it was further validated in my experience in the sense that we were discussing some of our cases were cases of companies in South Africa that Harvard Business School had done cases on. And just having that level of like, you know, feeling seen and valued was super important to me. And then secondly, I wanted an MBA program from a cultural perspective where it was going to be easier to assimilate. And obviously, given sort of the Anglo-Saxon history of South Africa and the UK, it really wasn't as big of an adjustment as it is to like American culture. So those were sort of my two things. And then Oxford as a university is just really, outstanding.
Yeah, happy to chip in. I think they've covered much of similar things that I considered. But just to double click on the Africa context, it wasn't just a function of representation for me. It was more also bringing in perspectives, African perspectives into the program. So we had the Africa elective. That was a big sway for me. Also having a not just a quota system, but also a bios, a symbiotic relationship in which you bring in case studies and programs where faculties in Africa are able to teach and also bring into play the African context was a big sway for me. The other thing was more of diversity, and it's not just the diversity in terms of demographics, but also background and experience. I looked at the program in terms of the experience, it's more on the higher side. Even age-wise, you have folks with 2 or some with 15 years experience. So there's that broader scope of opportunities to learn, because I knew I wasn't just going to learn from the course content, but also from my colleagues on the program itself. So those nuances help make the choice an easier one for Oxford. And of course, being a 1-year program helped too. I mean, doing an MBA half the price, half the time.
That's great. You were also involved in the African Alliance, is that correct? And the Clean Up Tech Challenge with the Mackenzie venture.
Yes, I was.
Yeah. Could you maybe speak a little bit more about that and your experience?
I will start with the McKinsey Clean Tech Challenge. So it was a thing we entered into out of the entrepreneurship project, the module. After we went through the process, we saw that what we came up with, which spoke to using modular energy for, of course, developing markets and where there's energy poverty, instead of relying on the national grid, which are nearly comatose in many of the markets. So we presented this to some of our advisors, and in the course of that, we were able to enter into the McKinsey challenge, where we got to the semifinals, and the experience showed two things. One, of course, the platform that the Oxford program provides for us to incubate an idea and develop a prototype around it that has real life and real world relevance and resonance. Also, having that opportunity to not just pitch that to a class of professors, but also to professionals and commercial interests, actually was very insightful and inspiring for me. And the third bit to that also was working with professionals from different backgrounds. So on my team, we had folks from India, myself from Nigeria, and a couple of European teammates, and we were able to bring in the different experiences that we've gathered in our professional life, but also in personal life, living in these different parts of the world, to pitch and go the whole hog with that challenge. And that brings me to the African Alliance. I mean, everyone that's spoken here has spoke about having that African broad base of African representation. And of course, there was no use in having a representation without being an active participant in the activities of the alliance. Unfortunately for us, because it was the COVID year, we couldn't really do much in-person activities, but we were able to also drive forward, bringing in, I remember there was a talk we had with a former minister from Nigeria. Also, we still had the African Forum, which was well attended, and we had participants from across the globe. So being part of that also, of course, energized and strengthened the resolve that this was a good choice to make.
Thank you for sharing. Grace, you were also on the committee on the African Alliance. Can you share a bit about your experience and why you think it's important for the Africa sector?
Yes, so there, I mean, as the other panelists have talked about, Oxford does sort of care a lot about bringing in African students, but also exposing students to business on the continent, including by doing electives. And one of the people who helps facilitate all of that is the chair of the Africa Alliance, who permanently works for Oxford. And what that means is that she sort of took time to engage with some of us when we were still in the selection process, to share a little bit more about sort of how Oxford saw the continent and how Oxford engaged with the continent. And I would say that for me, having that engagement also was sort of an additional reason why I was convinced that Oxford was the right place. And so that engagement actually started before we even arrived at Oxford. And she really does take time to reach out to all the different African students and build a cohort of the students. And so we would have activities such as social events, career talks where we would bring in speakers. Obviously, the big event of the year is the Oxford Africa Forum, which again, students get an opportunity to curate the forum together with the chair of their alliance and bring in speakers from all over the continent, as well as other individuals who are interested. And so for me, the Alliance became a conduit through which I was able to engage with fellow students from the continent, but then engage with business leaders on the continent throughout the MBA program. And again, that's not the only way you can get to engage with the continent. Besides the formal events that we had with the Alliance, we also had a lot of ad hoc social activities, networking activities with other African students. And again, as one of the panelists mentioned, we were quite a big cohort. I think for us, I was coming from Kenya. We had like 5 different students. We had a lot more Nigerians. We had a lot more South Africans. So it's a very big cohort of African students. And I think when I compare my experience with other friends who've attended other MBA programs where they'd only have like 2 African students or 3 African students, so you don't have as much of that network. So I would say, again, the Alliance was sort of like a launchpad for many of us coming from the continent and a way to connect with other Africans, but also other MBAs who are interested in the continent. But beyond that, there were so many other opportunities to engage with the continent. But just having that formalized system of the Alliance, I think, went a long way.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And for some of you who may not know, is we have a commitment to Africa in terms of the African Alliance, which is really just a body of people that are very committed into really exposing the Africa continent and really helping other people to understand it also. But you would know a few years ago that there would only be at least like 2% of people who were from the African continent on MBAs, especially in European schools. And so we're really proud that over the years we've been able to build on that and get 10% and above. So thank you for sharing that. It is an awesome alliance. Zinzi, could you tell us a little bit, during the MBA, you were the director of the Oxford Seed Fund. And can you tell us about that, what that entailed and how it shaped your Oxford experience?
Sure. So I think for me, I was in a private degree background for most of my like working years before the MBA. And so I was pretty clear about like my sort of angle and take on the MBA being centered around, just wanting to continue work around investing on the continent, developing the continent, and just broadening that skill set. So once I identified very quickly that there was the Oxford Seed Fund, so coming from a private equity background, VC is quite an adjacent skill set. I was really keen to participate in it. And it's really like, it follows the model of like a student-led VC fund where you've got a pot of money which is effectively granted by a benefactor. But I think since I've left, there's actually been fundraising for the Oxford Seed Fund. And effectively, there's about 7 to 11 of you who go through an application process and then interview process. And you're effectively selected to be part of like the Seed Fund leadership for that year. You each get allocated different roles. So my sort of role within that was the portfolio and portfolio maintenance, as well as due diligence. So effectively over the year, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to end up from a place of like driving investment initiatives. So looking at X number of startups, and you know that Oxford and Cambridge have very robust ecosystems for sort of developing startups and great ideas, and you invest, and then by the end of your MBA tenure, you need to have invested in at least, like, I think it was two to three of those businesses, which some go on to do really, really well. So I think the Unicorn Go one is one that's really touted a lot as coming from the Seed Fund, and really, you know, put the Oxford Seed Fund's name out there. And so for me, that experience was critical because for my MBA, outside of the coursework, which I felt like was great, it was really for that other experience of engaging with people. Firstly, we were all the directors were from different parts of the world, and we were all really unified in sort of a similar interest around, you know, the world of investing in VC. And so I think that it was a really enriching experience, also given that it ran the whole duration simultaneously to your program. And it was particularly unique because I don't think from the European programs that even if they do have like student-led VC funds, they're not as prominent and as sizable as Oxford. So yeah, that was, I think I did I answer all? Unless there's something I missed, let me know.
No, that was good. Thank you ever so much. Okay, so let's maybe talk a little bit about the details of the process, maybe the interviews, the admissions process. Maybe we can all share what was the most critical piece of preparation that helped you embrace the Oxford MBA and get the most amount out of it. Everyone's welcome to start. Take your time.
Fine, I'm happy to go. So in terms of just from a preparations perspective, or are you saying also during the MBA, like what's useful to get the most out of it?
Let's do both. Let's do from a
cool.
preparation and also whilst you are there, some advice.
So I think from a preparation perspective, it's just being really clear on your why. And so just being really clear on whether that program is a fit for you and being able to articulate that in the various engagements with the school. So I know Oxford at the time, it was Tammy Brophy who would come to South Africa quite often and have these engagements where they invite lots of people. And it's just being able to communicate with, you know, people who are in the same position as you, or as well as alumni around, you know, just getting more data points around making a case for, is this the right fit for you or not? I think that's really important. And then that sets you really up well to have really nice data points in your interview process to talk to that are quite tangible and like not necessarily generic, like most, you know, as if you've just only done desktop research. So I think the desktop research is a good place to start, but it's really about, you know, engaging with the school when it does come to your region and just being able to really build a strong case. For me, that the prep was really important outside of obviously GMAT and that, and giving yourself enough time to do that. But I think with GMAT as well, at the time, there were some people who had expressed that even if you articulate early to your school of interest that you need help and support with that, if they feel like you're a good candidate, they're willing to hold your hand through that journey. So that was also something interesting from a prep perspective that I thought was a great enabler. And then during the MBA, I think it's just because it's such a short program of a year, the best thing that I did for myself was kind of being really clear on my why, like what am I here to achieve? And to be clear on that in the sense that a lot of don't necessarily hinge that your 3 objectives or 3 goals for the year on outside factors, but like what are the key things you want to learn or walk away from that are within your control? And then building out sort of a plan to keep myself accountable with each like semester or term, and just, you know, having check-ins with myself at the end of, you know, each block or month to say, you know, on, I don't know, meeting people from different countries or engaging in things that I wouldn't ordinarily do just because I'm at Oxford. How am I doing on that front? And I think that, you know, I was able to make the most of like what was a 6-month in-person program versus like 3 months online because of that. And it also set me up well for my post-MBA experience.
Yeah, I think what I can add to that in terms of how to make the most out of the program once you're there is a lot of activities, co-curricular activities, academic activities that happen when you're there. And if anything, it's about knowing how to prioritize your time and which of the programs to engage in. And so I would encourage you all to, again, do research before you get there, because some of the co-curricular programs you actually have to apply in some cases before you arrive at Oxford. So I remember for the Alliance to be part of the committee, I had to apply. Once I got accepted, I had to apply, I think, a few weeks before we arrived at Oxford. Similarly, for Impact Lab, they have 2 cohorts that happen during the year. And if you want to be part of the first cohort, you have to already have worked on your application before you arrive at Oxford. So just to say that there's so many activities to do once you get there. And 1 year, you think it's a long time, but it's actually such a short period of time. And so thinking through what are some of those activities you want to do, which ones require you to engage ahead of time. And then once you're there, really try to immerse yourself as much as possible, not just in the MBA system, but in the broader university ecosystem. Again, if you're interested in climate as an example, there are other students outside of the MBA that are working on climate. They're doing degrees on the same topic. So find ways to engage with them. So all I can say is that you think that the 9 months that you're there and you're doing the co-activities is a long time, but it's actually a really short time. And so you really, really have to prioritize, and the sooner you can start doing that, the better.
Yeah, I'll just chip in that as everyone has said, the program is very short, so you probably have to do some homework before you get into the program. And that includes like job preparation and all of that. Just get your CV, and there are a lot of resources for that from the program. Get your CVs ready, understand what you want to do post the MBA. You don't have to be strict about these things, but be flexible. Have options A to C ready and have some framework with which you identify what opportunities you want to pursue on the program. Before even applying, I think the most important bit is self-reflection, reflecting on why you're doing this in the first place. It's a lot of investment in terms of money, time, in terms of emotion, and in some ways, it is life-changing. So you need to reflect on why you're doing this. It's a big bet on your career, on your future, but also you need to just decide for yourself, not for anyone else, not for what somebody else has done, why you want to do this, and also what you bring to the program, because of course, the program is a curation of different profiles from different parts of the world. You want to see your unique input into the program as a value add to itself. So I think those are the key considerations, at least those were for me when I was going on the program. Just be sure what you want to do. For instance, I decided before I got on the program that I didn't want any internship, so I would use the time, the summer period to do something else, and that's what I did. But also, of course, there were other things that I was flexible on. So just being sure your why and your priorities is essential.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. And that's always quite a common thread, knowing what you're saying yes to and knowing what you're saying no to, because everyone does say that when you come here, it is like Disneyland. You want to do absolutely everything, but to remind yourself, especially through the process, on why I'm here and what was my purpose here. Okay, so just to our audience, if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box and the Q&A box. We would be happy to answer them at the end. maybe we can talk about, and from all of you, talk about which electives, co-curriculum activities, resources that you would recommend to people who were looking to rather transfer into consulting, pivot into consulting, or is looking to work in consulting.
I think my advice would probably be, I guess my case is after the MBA, I didn't necessarily go straight into consulting. I went back into the industry that I was in before. But in hindsight, sort of reflecting on the menu of options available, I would strongly suggest is obviously consulting is more about your ability to think, solve problems. And also if you are going into the MBA with particular work experience, is just being able to say, how does that skill set then translate into, the consulting skill set? And I think a good way to test that is there was, like every MBA program, and Oxford also has it, like a consulting sort of club or consulting vertical that's really focused on people who that's what they want to do post the MBA. I think it doesn't hurt to join that and participate in sort of, whether you're ultimately going to interview for consulting or not. As someone who's made the decision recently, I just think the skill set and the way of thinking is still valuable. And so if you're looking for an extracurricular that is still going to test you and stretch you in that year, that would be sort of a key one. And then another one is, secondly, like obviously with consulting, you're focused on different businesses, and the financial acumen, I think, is something that does set me apart. And so I did finance lab when I was in Oxford, and I think that was absolutely outstanding. It was really a standout sort of co-curricular program. So I would rate those two as sort of the best ones. And I think they work well. They complement each other very well for sort of setting me up for success for what I currently do now.
I'll be too good to go next. I think one of the electives that I did was what we call a business strategy. There was a simulation in that in that elective, and in the course of that program, I realized that this is a real life scenario which took input from both political, if I could say, or policy related context and applying business strategy to it. So, and that was one of those valuable insights you would get to see, especially because it was a simulation. You had to play a role in that and you would see how things play out in real life. That's one key elective that was very helpful in nudge me in that particular direction of consulting. But one other thing I would say is that I don't think there's a universal profile. You have to be able to sell yourself and sell your skill set as how they relate to consulting expectations. So if your your background is in education, for instance, I had a friend that was a teacher that did teach for India. She's currently a consultant in one of the MBBs, who was able to relate how our skill set managing students, for instance, and managing, of course, the school program and all of that related to stakeholders management, and then solving problems that related to those kind of interactions also led to her establishing how she was a big problem solver, as well as other key skills that consulting firms are looking for. So the bottom line is being able to identify your skills and see how they translate into the consulting skills that the firms are looking for. And then, of course, identifying different programs within the MBA itself that suits your weak points or your interests.
The only thing I'd add is, so we've heard that you can leverage the curriculum by taking electives, you can take co-curricular activities such as the finance lab, and you can also join the student group. There was a consulting club when we were there. The other thing I'd like to highlight is the career office. And so within the career office is actually a set of advisors that specifically focus on the consulting track. So they work closely with the students who are interested in going into consulting or strategy roles. And if I recall correctly, is that you actually had access to the portal before you got to Oxford. And so particularly for people who are interested in consulting, you have to do some of the preparation quite early on. And so I'd tell like anyone who's interested in consulting and you end up going to Oxford, actually make sure you're accessing the portal, the career portal, which you'll get access to before you get to Oxford. Start taking some of the lessons on there. There's some online tutorials, and then start connecting with the advisors early on. Again, I remember even on our first week there during orientation, there was an opportunity to connect with the career advisors. And again, you could go to the specific advisors focusing on consulting and tell them about your background and what kind of pivot you're hoping to make. I think that will really go a long way. The other thing I'd say is that I know that even after your MBA program, you still have access to some of these advisors. So the access doesn't end right when you graduate. There's sort of like an early career program to help folks as they're transitioning into their full-time role. And in some cases, you might find that even if your first job right out of the MBA might not be in consulting, you might find that your next job will be in consulting. And again, making sure you're tapping into the resourcing, continuing to tap into the resources even after you graduate can really go a long way.
That's great. One of the things that we are known for is the diversity that we do bring to the MBA. Could maybe a few of you speak about people who you maybe got to know, do know, still know, who maybe have different interests, different sectors, and maybe clubs that you got involved with, interesting stories from your college. Does anyone have anything to share? I've kind of put you on the spot because I don't think you couldn't have all been in the library, surely.
I think an interesting sort of, for me in my cohort, what I found particularly interesting, and obviously the way they mix us together in our various sections, is invariably you definitely get people who are from various different backgrounds. I think we had a guy who was like, comes from a music background, worked in the orchestra in Canada, and was now looking to kind of use his music background to pivot. There were quite a few people from sort of the creative arts industries who were also looking to use this to bolster their business acumen. And I think that, that intersection of putting those types of people in a room together to invariably become classmates and then friends would have never really happened otherwise. I think another experience is particularly bringing together people from all over the world. Even just this year, there was, a wedding of people from our cohort. And so, you find yourself post MBA still meeting up in various locations around the world, just catching up on what you guys have been doing since then. And I think, you've got people like one of my closest friends used to work for the government in Colombia, and that's thanks to Oxford. Or like you go skiing in Switzerland for a holiday because, that's where you guys are now choosing to meet up because one of your friends now lives in Switzerland. So I think that for me, it was really about what if the world is your oyster? Or I guess another interesting thing is what's her name? Ellie Goulding's husband was in our cohort. And so everybody was like, oh, he's a bit of like a celebrity husband. But I think Oxford is just such a unique place in that because of its brand and reputation, it brings together so many different people. And yeah, a lot of those do become your lifelong relationships and bonds that we still leverage today.
Yeah, plus one for the weddings. Like earlier this year, I was in Philippines for a wedding between two MBAs. One of them was my flatmate, and so and of course you have people forming businesses. You're going to attend a lot of weddings. That's it's so certain. Like I'm almost tired of them right now. So But yeah, people building businesses out of the MBA, quite a number of those arose from just a pizza dates or something that you discuss with a random person on a random Tuesday afternoon. So it's an opportunity to build those lifelong relationships. But also, I think the value of Oxford to me wasn't just in the business school itself or the program, but you're part of a larger cohort in your college, and then you're part of the university. So those three layers provide ample opportunities to build relationships, to leverage different resources and tools that will be valuable to you for a lifetime.
I can't echo enough the fact that the Oxford MBA is one of the few MBAs that allows you to be part of the broader university. And so, as Bemi said, you get to be part of a college. You get to choose a college once you're admitted. And the colleges all have such diversity in terms of what is the student population. Some of them are grad only, others are mixed with undergrad. Some of them are a little bit more focused on STEM, others medicine. And so the colleges are so different from each other in certain ways. And you get the opportunity to potentially select the college you end up in. And then even with the college system, there were some MBAs that were very involved in the day-to-day activities in the college, and then there were others who were a lot less involved and a lot more involved in the MBA. So you really get to choose how much you want to embed yourself in the college community. I think for me, I would say that that was one of the most defining times of my time at Oxford. We were also lucky that we were just the first cohort that was fully back in person after COVID. And so there was just this desire to reconnect. And there were so many events, social events that were happening even at the college level. And you can get to be a member of the MCR, which is like the group of graduate students within your college. You have a space where you can go and meet other students. I would really encourage you to actually take time to meet other members of your college that are not part of the MBA. In my case, my college had a lot of STEM PhD students, so computer science, physicists. One of my closest friends from my college was actually someone who was a former journalist in Ukraine, and she was pursuing her PhD in sociology when she was there. And so I think those experiences where every once in a while you get to step out of your MBA bubble and really get to hear about what people are studying, what their experiences are, I think for me was quite life defining. And then the most important tip is when you make friends with PhD students, they're probably going to be at Oxford for another 3 to 4 years. So it means whenever you go back to Oxford, they can bring you to their formal dinners even after you graduate. So that's my way of making sure I can go to formal dinners whenever I go back to Oxford. So make sure you're actually making friends with folks outside of your MBA program when you can.
Thank you for sharing and that little bonus that we got there. Okay, let's see if we've got any questions. I don't think we do at the moment. If you have any questions, please do them now because we're on our last question. So maybe we can hear from all of you in terms of what would be your number one piece of advice to someone starting the MBA program so that they can make the most out of their experience. Just one advice.
I can go. I think I echoed this earlier when I started, but I think the context is I thought I was going to go on this 9-month, 12-month program, and we had a massive external shock in COVID happening during our year in March, where everything just converted to online, right? And I think the learnings or the trauma bonds from that as a cohort, even 5 years on, are just that I think be very clear on your why. Why are you going to this program? Be very clearly articulate 3 to 5 goals that you want to achieve for yourself. Make sure that those are largely within your control, because things like COVID can happen. And then, like if your goal is bigger than you, then that's sort of the crisis or the internal meltdown that a lot of people had who had goals that were bigger than themselves. So focus on what can you learn, what can you take away, what things can you actively drive, track yourself against that. And yeah, just know it's a short clock because, then the program rolls around and you need to be thinking about the next move post that.
I would say one thing, enjoy the MBA, and I mean that seriously, like enjoy it. Immerse yourself in the program, in the academic work, in the extracurricular that you are interested in the community you find yourself in at the business school, in your college, at the broader university. Just enjoy it because oftentimes folks come into the program and they're worried about the job. It's fine to worry and plan for a job post MBA, but sometimes people tend to lose sight of this being an answered prayer. Like you've worked probably like 4 or 5 years planning for the MBA. Now you're on the program, just enjoy it. And so don't let your next step deprive you of the fruit of that journey. So that's all I want to say.
Well, Bemi, you took my point.
Oh, sorry about that.
But it's true. Go to all the social events, as many as you can. But I guess in order to say something different, I'd say go to class. I think on day one, people are so excited about being in this MBA program. They're all showing up at class, and then with time, people start to have different priorities, and there's so many activities that are happening around you, and it's easy to almost like forget how important it is that you've sort of paid to go into this really important program, learn from world-class professors. Again, remember, once you get to the third semester and you feel like you want to trail off a little bit and not show up to class, remember, go to class. I think those experiences is something that you will really treasure afterwards, and some of the best electives happen in the last semester. So go to class.
I love that, and I love that as an ending. Well, I don't believe we have any questions, so I just want to thank our alums for coming on. I know time is precious, so we really do appreciate hearing your experience and your journey. And thank you everyone who has come on. This has been recorded, so we will send this out. And hopefully whoever couldn't make it will be able to enjoy it. Once again, my name is Sarah Lou. You can write to me via the Oxford MBA inbox or my LinkedIn if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to answer them. I've also seen some of our admits who will be coming in September, so really looking forward to seeing you here in September. But for now, enjoy the rest of your day and take care. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, guys.
Everyone.
Thank you very much,
Bye.
Gary.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Fiona.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.